Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you a new video about the love story of James and Diep. In the previous episode, we witnessed the deeply moving journey of John's transformation. It was not a change that happened overnight, but a long and difficult process, slow, exhausting, and at times seemingly impossible to continue. Once a man who had gone astray, who had made wrong decisions that pushed his life into darkness, John carried a past so heavy that even he himself was afraid to face it. Every step he took was held back by guilt, by society's doubt, and by the constant torment within his own heart. When he seemed to have reached a dead end, John met James and Diep. Not through grand promises or flashy acts of help, but through the way they listened to him and saw him as a human being, rather than a name forever tied to past mistakes. James patiently guided him through the smallest steps: how to start over with livestock farming, how to manage work, and how to face failure without giving up. Diep stayed by his side with gentleness and understanding. She never pressed him about his past, never dug into the pain he carried, but quietly believed that the man standing before her was still capable of starting over. Thanks to that compassion and trust, John was given a chance to begin again. The farm started out with just a few crude sheds. The work was heavy, the income unstable. There were days when he worked from dawn until nightfall, sweat soaking his back, his hands rough and calloused from labor. Sometimes there were outbreaks of disease, sometimes losses, sometimes moments when all his efforts felt meaningless. But whenever he felt like giving up, John would remember the trusting eyes of James and Diep, remember the opportunity they had given him, and remind himself that he was not allowed to fall. When the first results finally appeared, still small and fragile, John felt something he had never known before: the feeling of standing on his own through honest work. The money he earned was not much, but it was his sweat, his effort, proof of a new path he was walking. In his heart grew a simple yet sincere desire to bring that money to thank James and Diep, the people who had not abandoned him when he was at his weakest. On the day John came to see them, he carried with him all his gratitude, along with a quiet trembling in his heart. But James and Diep refused. Not because they did not appreciate his gesture, but because they had never viewed their help as a debt to be repaid. They only wanted him to continue living well, to keep walking the honest path, and to use that money to build his own future. Those words left John speechless. For the first time in many years, he felt completely trusted, without conditions, without calculation. After that day, it was as if John gained a new source of strength. He became even more determined, refusing to let himself return to his old ways. He reinvested all the money he had saved back into the farm, expanded his livestock operation, and learned to care for the animals more carefully, paying attention to every small detail. Day by day, he recorded his work, learned from mistakes, corrected them, slowly but surely. The business gradually stabilized, no longer plagued by the extreme ups and downs of before. John's life began to move toward a sense of peace he had never dared to imagine, let alone dream of. During that time, as life became less precarious, John met a special woman. Their meeting was unplanned, free of grand expectations. She entered his life naturally, like a part of the new rhythm he was slowly getting used to. She, too, carried her own hardships, having endured losses and long periods of silently shouldering life on her own. In her eyes, John saw a familiar exhaustion, like a reflection of his former self. Two wounded souls, who had once stood at different depths of pain, found empathy in each other without needing many explanations. They understood one another through unfinished stories, through shared silences more than words. They came together quietly, without noise, without haste, without promises reaching too far into the future. Just gentle conversations, moments of listening, sharing past stumbles, and simple hopes for what lay ahead. Their feelings grew over time, quietly yet steadily. It was not a love that erupted all at once, but a sense of peace when they were together, the comfort of being oneself without pretense. And before they even realized it, love had ripened. Enough for them both to understand that after all the loss and pain, they still deserved a complete happiness. Enough for them to decide to hold hands and walk the rest of life together, guided by the understanding, patience, and faith they had learned through the hardest years of their lives. One day, when life at the farm had gradually settled into a steady rhythm, John and the woman beside him decided to visit James and Diep. This trip carried none of the urgency or anxiety of their previous visits, only a calmness mixed with a quiet excitement that was hard to put into words. In John's hands were 2 wedding invitations, carefully protected throughout the journey. They were not merely announcements of an important event, but the culmination of a long road he had traveled, from mistakes and lost direction to the courage to stand firm and believe in his own happiness. Standing at the door, John suddenly paused for a brief moment. He took a deep breath, as if to steady the emotions rising within him. The woman glanced at him gently, her eyes soft, silently squeezing his hand in encouragement without a word. Then John knocked. The door opened, and James and Diep appeared, surprised, then clearly delighted to see them. The meeting unfolded naturally and simply, yet inside John, a quiet tide of emotion surged. After a few familiar greetings, John slowly took the 2 invitations from his pocket. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. He hesitated as he spoke the invitation, his voice lowering, cautious, as if afraid that this happiness was still too fragile. In that moment, the room seemed to fall silent. James and Diep froze for a few seconds, surprise unmistakably flashing in their eyes. But very quickly, that stillness was replaced by bright, genuine smiles, not polite or perfunctory ones, but joy rising from the depths of their hearts. James looked at John for a long moment, his gaze calm yet warm, as if reflecting on the entire journey John had walked. Diep smiled softly, her eyes glowing with unmistakable emotion. They said little, yet in that instant, John felt their recognition and quiet pride in him. That joy did not come solely from the fact that John was about to get married, but from witnessing a man who had truly changed. No longer the John of despair, exhaustion, and deep self-doubt. Standing before them now was a more mature, more composed John, someone who, above all, knew how to cherish the life he had built. Seeing him find his own happiness seemed to matter even more than any material success. James spoke up to offer his congratulations, his voice warm and sincere. He wished John and the woman beside him a truly loving home, one where they could lean on each other in hard times and share both the joys and challenges of life. Diep added her blessing as well, gentle yet profound, hoping that the wounds of their pasts would gradually be healed through daily understanding and love. When James and Diep promised without hesitation that they would attend the wedding, John felt his throat tighten. He bowed his head slightly, a quiet way of hiding the emotions welling up inside. To him, their presence on that important day was far more than that of ordinary guests. They were the people who had witnessed and helped shape the greatest turning point of his life. It was proof that he had truly been accepted, trusted, and seen as someone worthy of happiness. The woman standing beside John smiled softly too, her eyes reflecting a silent gratitude. Though she said little, she understood that James and Diep held a special place in John's journey and would be an important part of the memories of their coming joyful day. The meeting ended in a warm, peaceful atmosphere, leaving John with a rare sense of completeness, the feeling of a man who had finally stepped into a new chapter, lighter, calmer, and full of hope. At last, the long-awaited day arrived, softly, just as happiness had finally found its way to John after so many years of trials. His wedding was not loud or extravagant, neither ostentatious nor elaborate, yet every small corner was filled with warmth. The setting was simple, familiar faces were all present, each carrying sincere smiles and heartfelt blessings. It was a ceremony that needed no flowery words, because the peace and happiness radiating from the bride and groom spoke for themselves. As John stood at the altar, dressed neatly in his suit, his eyes never left the woman holding his hand tightly. In that moment, all old memories seemed to drift away, leaving only the vivid present. The bride beside him glowed, her smile gentle yet steady, like a quiet affirmation that they had chosen each other after all of life's turbulence. Their fingers intertwined, not for display, but enough to feel the trust and bond they shared. From the seats below, James watched the scene in silence. His heart softened with an emotion difficult to name, partly moved, partly at peace, and partly lost in deep reflection. Before him was not merely a wedding, but the conclusion of a long journey he had witnessed from the very beginning. From a John once burdened by shame, lost among mistakes and remorse, to the John of today, calm, grounded, and mature enough to step into a true home of his own. James gently leaned over and took Diep's hand. The gesture was light, yet full of meaning. He whispered, in a low and steady voice, that one day they too would have a happiness just as strong, perhaps even stronger. It was not a promise spoken before a crowd, but a wish voiced in the most sincere moment. Diep turned to him, her eyes soft and deep, filled with a trust that needed no explanation. She nodded ever so slightly, a small gesture, yet enough for James to know that she was facing the future with him, with complete reassurance and love. Throughout the ceremony, James and Diep looked at John with unmistakable pride. Every blessing spoken, every round of applause stirred emotions John could not hide. He bowed his head in gratitude, his heart overflowing with thankfulness. To him, this wedding was not merely the start of a marriage, but the closing of a turbulent chapter of life, and the opening of a new one, earned through relentless effort and perseverance. That day, James and Diep blessed John with all their sincerity. There were no long speeches, no lectures or reminders, only simple words born from true understanding. They knew that the man before them was no longer the lost soul of the past, no longer someone trapped in guilt and insecurity. Instead, he was a man who had learned to rise after failure, to cherish second chances, to love with maturity, and to take responsibility for his own life. John had found a woman willing to walk beside him to the very end, not out of pity, but out of love, empathy, and conscious choice. To James and Diep, that was far more precious than any promise. They believed that when someone has endured enough pain to truly understand the value of happiness, the home they build will be protected with utmost care. The ceremony ended in laughter, embraces, and unfinished well-wishes. Yet in the hearts of everyone present, especially James and Diep, there remained a clear, lasting feeling, a feeling of faith. Faith that good things will come to those who are patient and sincere. Faith that after all the missteps, one can still find their own light. And faith that the journey ahead, for John, and for themselves, will continue to be written with love, resilience, and hope. The episode gradually comes to a close in a joyful and heartwarming atmosphere, as smiles still linger on everyone's faces. There are no more worries, no lingering weight of the past, only a very real sense of peace spreading through each moment. The familiar sounds of the ceremony, the simple words of blessing, the sincere embraces, all blend together, creating a gentle yet emotionally complete ending to the journey we've just witnessed. John's journey of rebuilding his life, from his darkest days to standing firmly at the altar today, has officially entered a new chapter. This is no longer a chapter of mistakes, remorse, or self-doubt, but one of happiness and calm. A chapter written through relentless effort, through countless falls and the courage to rise again, and through the trust placed in him by those around him. The John of today is not perfect, but he has learned to cherish the small things, to value the chance to truly live and to be loved. As the ceremony ends, each character quietly carries away their own reflections. For John, it is a feeling of relief and gratitude, as if he can finally smile without fearing the shadows of his past. For James and Diep, it is a quiet joy in witnessing someone who once lost his way now finding his path again. Their happiness is not loud or showy, but calm and profound, just as they have always stood beside John from the very beginning. That warm atmosphere lingers long after the final rituals conclude. Every glance, every gesture carries a belief in the good things ahead. Though life will surely continue to bring challenges, at least in this moment, everyone has the right to believe that effort and kindness will always be rewarded in their own way. And from here, the story pauses, making room for the next journeys that await. John's life has turned a page, but the lives of James and Diep continue, with new choices, new challenges, and new emotions gradually taking shape. What they have been through becomes a foundation, a shared memory, helping each of them move forward more steadily on their own paths. Stay tuned for the next episode to continue following the stories of James, Diep, and John. The chapters ahead are still waiting to be told, with everyday moments, quiet reflections, and genuine emotions. Don't forget to leave a comment to send your blessings to John, a man who once made mistakes, once stood at the edge of giving up, but chose to turn back, seize his chance, and find his own happiness through change from within. Thank you all for taking the time to follow the channel and for accompanying this story from the very beginning to this moment. Your interest, attention, and support are the motivation for these stories to keep being written, fully and sincerely. See you again in the next video, where the journey will continue with new chapters. Bye bye.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình đang ảnh đã, mình hiện tại là đang làm ảnh chưa. Tạm biệt mọi người, cảm ơn vì đã theo dõi hết video của mình. Tạm biệt nhé.